The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
No quick fix. The battle over how to repair Chicago's pension crisis is in overdrive as Mayor Emanuel pushes a plan to spread the pain.
A group calls itself The Rescue. See how it's throwing a lifeline to homeless young adults in Chicago.
And police claim Chicago's crime rate is falling, but new reports suggest officers underreport assaults and murders. All of these stories and more on In the Loop. Who's right when it comes to tracking Chicago violence? And Senator Durbin's position on abortion creates a storm in Springfield.
Spring comes to Chicago with 27 shootings last weekend alone. But Chicago police say crime statistics are at historic lows. Now, 2 reports claim those numbers may be wrong. Concerned residents just want the violence to stop.
Well, I think there's not enough resources going to the communities where the kids need them.
Speaking of kids, how much discipline is too much? A group of Chicago charter schools is getting mixed reviews for being too tough on students.
I believe we need discipline. I mean, we've gotten away from it. We've taken a lot of power away from parents.
School officials defend their strict policy, saying it keeps students safe and focused.
I don't think any church should deny anybody communion or the right to serve or the right to practice their faith under any circumstances.
That's not what the priest at Blessed Sacrament Parish in Springfield is saying about denying Senator Durbin Holy Communion. Addressing the issue, the Monsignor said the senator's pro-choice position puts him really outside of communion or unity with the church's teaching on life. Our guests today are ready to weigh in. Joining us are investigative journalist and writer Renee Ferguson, Nick Kacherubis, visiting assistant professor, School of Public Service at DePaul University, and feature columnist Nicole Townsend. Welcome to you all.
Thanks.
2 reports out this week, one from the Inspector General, the other from Chicago Magazine, both saying crime in the city, serious crimes such as homicides and assaults, are being underreported or misreported by police. Renee, how disturbing is this?
Well, it's very disturbing, but it's not new. They've been doing it for a long time, for at least 10 years, maybe going back before that. I remember when Phil Klein was the police superintendent, and he defined a new category, a death investigation. So somebody dies and they're killed and it's a murder, and you know it's a murder. We're not calling it that. We're calling it a death investigation, and it kind of goes into the garbage. So we have a lot of homicides and we have a lot of death investigations, and the people are still dead. Our streets are still not safe, and you know, quotas and words and language and parsing the truth doesn't help us.
But seriously, you say that this is kind of a well-known thing, at least among reporters, that this may go on. But how much faith does the public put in those statistics, Nick?
Well, I think they're required to keep those statistics, and whether there's been some maneuvering in the last couple months or whatever, that these reports are really looking at. But if you look over the last 10 years, the homicide rate has really been hovering around the same mark. It's gone slightly up and gone slightly down. This year so far it's down, which overall, if you think about it, where the budget are, where the police, where the cuts have been, that's not a bad position to be in, although it's horrible because every one of these is a tragedy. So something needs to be done, but I don't think the numbers are as bad as people make them to be.
And clearly the police should be under some pressure to keep crime down. But how much pressure, Nicole, is too much pressure?
I mean, when you're in a position of authority, I think that you should always be held responsible to report the truth. At least that's what the community has always had faith in. And so at the end of the day, I believe the bigger the pressure, the more pressure, the better.
And we've seen in the Chicago Magazine articles, and some of the reporters there talked to the families of these victims whose cases are regarded as death investigations and feel like they're kind of at the bottom of the pile and not being handled well.
Well, and I think that's the important thing, is each one of these, whether it's marked as a homicide or a different category. These are individual lives, and so that piece cannot be lost, and that's why these things need to be taken more seriously. And the problem needs to continue to mount on the police superintendent to make sure that these numbers continue to move. And I think that's the important piece there.
But putting pressure on numbers doesn't really solve our problem. You know, we've got a big drug cartel that operates in our city. It's like Al Capone. You know, Chicago is a drug hub. And if we are going to do anything about the murder rate, we've got to solve this problem. Our kids don't have jobs, so they take a job running drugs. And what goes with that job is a gun. And then when you've got a gun, you can kill people. And you protect your turf. And so what we're really looking at is an economy, a cash economy, where people spend cash for cars and clothes, and everybody looks the other way. And this is drug money. And it's putting food on the table, and it's a serious problem. And we're not dealing with that if you play with the numbers, however you do it, whatever you say.
And don't those numbers indicate how police marshal resources and what kind of money they may get to fight crime?
They do.
I think the numbers do. And I agree that it's a systematic problem because the numbers have hovered around those same area, and you know, more resources have to be put in if you want to really solve the problem.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the point that needs to be taken. Whether they're playing with the numbers just a little bit or not, if you want to see a major decrease, you're going to have to put more resources into it.
All right, quality of life for people in these communities is greatly diminished because there are no jobs. And so then your young man goes out and he gets a job selling drugs. Well, and he brings money home and maybe helps pay the mortgage. So you look the other way. I saw it evolve that way over the last 20 years in this city, just like that. Nice people, church-going folks. They just kind of looked the other way when their kids started selling drugs because they needed the money and they had lost their jobs and were unemployed. So it's an economic issue.
Speaking of money and crime, we'll switch gears here. Some customers at a Chase Bank branch on the South Side say their bank is the only branch in the city that still has a metal detector, and neighbors feel like they're being disrespected. Nicole, you have some life experience here. Do metal detectors belong in banks?
I'm going to say yes. I've sat on the front line of a multi-billion-dollar institution on the teller line, and so it's a bit more complex than what people originally see and understand. I feel like when you go to work, you should feel safe, and you should not have to worry about the extra security. And I feel like the metal detectors being placed there adds just that. It's a high-risk job, and I say the more security, the better.
To the concerns of the neighbors, though, aren't there less obvious ways to secure a bank?
Well, I'd say there are, but I think it's important to note that this bank has had this metal detector since day one, and the neighbors were initially, opposed to it. But the bank has still flourished; it's still in business. I really think it's a business decision. Could they do it other ways? Absolutely. But if the customers and the neighbors didn't want it, they shouldn't bank there, and another bank should come in and get that business. Is realistically.
To your point, couldn't customers just vote with their feet if they don't like it, Renee?
I think so. I think they should boycott the bank if they don't like it. They should just don't go there. You're absolutely right, Nick. But, the thing is, my husband was, he was held up at a bank at gunpoint. And that's devastating for us. Mm-hmm. Very, very hard, And so, and they had everything. It was secure. They had everything. And it was Hyde Park. And so, it happens. This is a city. People are desperate, and they do desperate things. And so I think any and everything that we can do to protect the safety of our citizens, you got to admit that you're at risk.
Absolutely.
Just like you said, Nicole.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm sorry if people are upset or embarrassed, but that's the reality that we live with, and you can't look the other way.
But I think it's an unusual move to see that in the commercial private sector, but I also think it speaks to kind of a division of roles there, and the corporation at this point has to figure out how to protect itself, and it's choosing to do it this way. And if it wasn't effective, I think, or if the customers were changing their minds and banking somewhere else, they might make a change.
Well, we see them in office buildings, we see them in schools, which takes us to our next topic. Noble charter schools are under fire for their strict discipline. Kids are getting demerits for anything, for not sitting up straight, and I'm guilty of that, for saying bless you when someone sneezes because they don't have permission to speak in class. How much discipline, Nicole, is too much?
Well, as a child growing up, my discipline started at home. My parents had to only look at me a certain way, and I knew that there would be prices to pay if I behaved poorly in school. And so I believe that there needs to be a balance. And what's going on now with this particular charter school seems a bit excessive. I mean, children are being fined. The parents don't have the money to pay for the fines. And so I believe that the discipline should start at home first, which is something that we lack. And yeah.
I like it, actually. But I think that what they really ought to do is give every child $500 Noble dollars at the beginning of school. You know, some play money at the
Level the
beginning
playing
of school.
field.
And level the playing field. Because, as you say, consequences are important, but those consequences may not be so rough for someone who's got money.
Well, I think you have to think about what a charter school is there to do. The whole purpose of a charter school is to change the climate and educate students in a different way. And these parents and these students choose to be enrolled in this school, so they know it going in. And I think the other thing that's important to recognize is, these fines are like $1 fines and $2 fines, and
There's a $140 fine if you have a number of detentions. Though,
yeah,
so they
but
can
they'll
add
work.
up.
They'll work out a planning system for you. But I think it's important to realize that this school has had success, and they're trying to solve the education issue in a unique way. And again, similar to the bank issue, if you don't believe that's the best way for your child to be educated, there are other options for you.
The president and others have argued that the zero tolerance, these strict discipline policies are essentially a school to prison pipeline because they encourage delinquency and suspensions, that sometimes this harsh discipline can do more harm than good.
Well, I think if you could take the subjectivity out of it and you could be really rational about it, which we cannot be, then I could see it. But the fact of the matter is that discipline, and it's all subjective. I might not like the way you're sitting. I might not like the color you have on. I may not like your parents. And so there's that human element that keeps it from being really objective. So and that's always been the case, and it'll be that way forever. So what do? Well, I think we do have to teach our kids that there are consequences to their actions.
Absolutely. All right, we have one quick round here. Catholic bishop has agreed with the priest in Springfield who said that Senator Dick Durbin can no longer receive communion there because of his views on abortion. The bishop said this is not punitive. Nicole, is it?
I always have a tough time wrapping my head around organized religions, because I feel like when you choose a certain faith to follow, you should be able to be yourself and have free will to choose.
Nick?
I think it's a little off base. Dick Durbin didn't just come out with this decision. Since he's been elected, he's been a pro-choice person. And given the new pope that's come into play, that's kind of taken the stance of opening things up, it seems a little suspect to me.
Renee, we'll let you have the last word on this one.
I think Durbin represents man's law, and the bishops say they represent God's law. And Durbin knows he represents man's law in this, and he just needs to change churches, go get communion somewhere else, because he knows what his church stands for, and he's against it.
We will leave it at that. Thank you to our guests, Renee Ferguson, Nick Katjarubis, Nicole Townsend. Thanks for being here. There are a number of programs in Chicago that provide help to the homeless. An estimated 25,000 young adults are on the streets. Many identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgendered. Tonight, we take a closer look at an organization that serves this unique population. Samuel Guzman could no longer afford his climbing rent. Jose Ramos lost his job and moved in with a relative who fell on hard times, too.
I was on my own for a little bit, and then I went back to my uncle's house, but I couldn't stay there because he was losing his house.
I was struggling by myself, and I'm bisexual.
Both young men found El Rescate, or the rescue. To them, it is more than just shelter. Nestled in the heart of Chicago's Humboldt Park neighborhood, this program has given hundreds of Latino youth the compassion, support, and services needed to transition to life beyond homelessness.
The mission of the rescue is to provide independency to those youth that are LGBTQ/HIV that are homeless out there. What we do is try to get them stable, being able to be on their own, and continue their education, get employment. That way they be able to be responsible for themselves and be able to provide for themselves.
El Rescate is one of only a few transitional housing programs in the country dedicated to this population. It provides community and security.
It's easier to say I'm bisexual here because back then I kept on saying I was straight. And when I got to know and come out with a bunch of other people that's in that categories, it made me feel more comfortable to come out like that.
Here, they give you up to 2 years to get on your feet. They don't charge you anything at the door. I'm taking full advantage of this program in a positive way instead of in a negative way.
With the help of El Rescate, Jose and Sam have been able to build and begin carrying out ambitious plans for the future.
I plan on to go get my GED at Wright College and then transfer to Cordon Bleu to actually get my culinary certificate.
Expectations was to get a tutor, to get a job, and also save money and learn how to budget my money. I have met those goals.
There's not many places out there where this youth could go and say, hey, this is who I am, this is my issue, this is my traumas, how can you help me? Or just, make that connection. There's not many places like that, especially in the Latino community. Just like a family. When we say we care, we do care.
We wish those young men well.
And they've just celebrated the 2nd anniversary of the program. Well, that wraps up tonight's show. You are now in the loop. Until next time, I'm Chris Beard.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Good night.
Good night.